A respected award-winning high school music teacher is now in hot water after police say she crossed every possible line with a former student. She's accused of grooming him for years, sending him graphic messages and photographs, and that the abuse began when he was just a young teenager. We're going inside the shocking arrest warrant where the teacher allegedly even admits to sending explicit photos and calls her own text messages to the victim, quote, stupid. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Stewart. Hey guys, real quick, there's a reason On the Case is one of the most watched shows on YouTube, just like there's a reason Morgan & Morgan is America's largest personal injury law firm. They're a firm of more than 1,000 attorneys who have recovered $25 billion from more than 500,000 clients. In the past few months alone, a client in Florida received $12 million when insurance offered just $350,000. In Pennsylvania, another client was awarded $26 million. That's 40 times the insurer's offer. Morgan & Morgan makes it easy to fight for what you deserve. You can even start a claim from your phone. So if you're injured, you can start a claim at forthepeople.com/OTC. You can click the link below or scan the QR code on our screen. We have a major story that is breaking in Meriden, Connecticut, and the court documents that we just got our hands on frankly are wild. A former high school music teacher, 39-year-old Ciara Picard, is accused of sexually assaulting a student starting when he was just 14 years old. Now, this wasn't just any teacher. She was an award-winning educator with a prestigious fellowship at the Lincoln Center. But when police started digging, they uncovered years of alleged grooming, secret trips, and explicit messages, all while she was his teacher. Now, you've seen the headlines, but we have the actual court filing and the arrest affidavit that lays out everything that police say they have on this teacher. And trust me, the details in here go way beyond what's being reported thus far. We're talking about what police say were secret trips to New York City, expensive gifts, and a grooming relationship that escalated into explicit text messages and sexual encounters, all while this teacher was in a position of power. But here's the part that is really going to grab your attention. The affidavit includes photographs that the teacher allegedly sent to the student, which police say she admitted were of herself. And the text messages, they're graphic. We have them quoted directly from the warrant. One line that she allegedly sent reads, quote, "I want you so bleeping bad." And that's just the tip of the iceberg in this story. Now that teacher is behind bars. She's facing multiple felony charges, and even more disturbing, the arrest warrant reveals that she initially denied everything. But then, when she was pressed, she admitted to sending inappropriate photos and calling their relationship, quote, "not okay." So we have the documents, and we're diving into every page. Here's where this case begins and what this story is really about, based on the narrative that police at this point are putting out and the allegations that we're reading in these court records. Now, back on August 25th, a now 25-year-old man walked into the Meriden, Connecticut Police Department, and he told detectives that he was sexually assaulted by his former high school music teacher years ago. It started when he was a freshman in high school. Now, investigators, they started interviewing him, and there was a timeline that emerged. And in that timeline, they say it's not just a single incident, but a 4-year relationship that he said began when he was 13 years old and in the 8th grade. According to the police report, the teacher, Ciara Picard, was his orchestra instructor all through high school from 2014 to 2018. But officials immediately knew that this was more than just a rumor. Police say the victim still had evidence, old text messages and photos saved on a computer. He was able to provide detectives with her phone number and specific graphic details. An investigation was then launched. What detectives found in their follow-up, according to the affidavit, changed everything. The very next day, on August 26th, detectives went to the high school to speak with Picard, and according to the arrest warrant, her story began to unravel. Now, she first denied any inappropriate relationships with students during her 13-year career. But then detectives started to press her, and she acknowledged the specific relationship with her former student. The affidavit reveals a disturbing portrait of a teacher who police say, crossed every professional boundary. The document alleges the inappropriate relationship began with text messaging, then it escalated to kissing during a trip to New York City when the victim was just 16. It details explicit incidents that the victim described and records the teacher's own alleged admissions, confirming that she sent revealing photos, calling her own graphic text, quote, stupid, and then she cried when she was confronted. For 3 months, police built their case. They reviewed the text messages, the photos, and alleged handwritten letters that the teacher allegedly sent to this victim. They spoke with the victim's mom, who recalled the teacher giving her son expensive gifts and visiting their home. Then, on December 2nd, 2025, the warrant was signed, and Ciara Picard actually turned herself into Meriden police. She was booked on 5 counts of sexual assault in the 2nd degree. They're felonies that could carry significant prison time. A judge set her bond at $25,000. So let's now dive a little more into this affidavit, which begins by establishing that the victim in this case, referred to as Victim 1, began high school in the fall of 2014 and then graduated in 2018, and he was 14 years old when he started his freshman year. The victim stated the grooming, though, began his freshman year, and he told police that the relationship took a turn during his junior year of high school, and it happened after a personal tragedy, the death of his father, and that is when he told police the relationship began to, quote, evolve. The victim then described a specific pivotal incident to detectives, an incident that moved this from an inappropriate communication to an alleged physical abuse of authority. He recalled to police, quote, Ciara took Victim 1 to New York City to watch a symphony. This trip was only Victim 1 and Ciara. During this trip, Ciara said to Victim 1, quote, I've always wanted to kiss you. The two then exchanged their first kiss. Victim 1 was 16 years old at the time. And it's just so twisted that allegedly this relationship took this turn, that this person who was a teacher, a superior, an educator, allegedly took advantage of this young student in the wake of the personal tragedy of the death of his dad. How do you make sense of that? And even more disturbing, police say it wasn't just one trip. The victim said that these private excursions were part of a pattern. The document details, quote, Victim 1 further disclosed that Ciara brought him to New York multiple times throughout high school and that she would purchase expensive dinners for him and get him gifts. Back at home, the communication, police say, became explicitly sexual. According to his statement in the warrant, Victim 1 stated that some things that she would say would be, quote, I want to kiss you. Victim 1 further explained that Ciara would commonly tell Victim 1 that she loved him. Then, he said it escalated to photographs. He told police they exchanged revealing images, but he also alleged there was a directive to cover their tracks. A key line from his account reads, quote, Victim 1 also stated that Ciara would tell Victim 1 to delete the text messages that she was sending him. Now, the most serious allegations involve physical encounters at the victim's home when he was 16 and 17 years old. He described a specific incident in the spring of 2017. Now, it's too graphic for us to show you from the court documents, but essentially, police say Victim 1 told them that she made comments to him about wanting to have sex with him before actually initiating the sexual contact. The victim explained to police why he didn't stop it. He gave insight into something of a power dynamic. The officer writes, quote, he explained that at the time he did not know what to do and felt as if he had to comply with what Ciara wanted. But this case isn't just one person's word. The victim provided police with tangible evidence that he saved for years. The affidavit includes screenshots of the alleged text messages, some with dates. For example, a message from July 24th, 2018, allegedly from Picard, that reads, quote, going out with friends and put on the red dress I was wearing that night on the beach. And Victim 1, I got so sad, so fast, I love you. Heart emoji. Another from March 9th, 2019 is far more graphic. We can't read you the whole thing, but it begins with, quote, I want you so bleeping bad. With this evidence in hand, detectives went to speak with Ciara Picard at the high school the very next day. Now, her interview, documented over several pages, appears to be a mix of denial, admission, and memory lapses. The affidavit details the beginning of the interview on August 26th. The officer writes that when first asked about inappropriate relationships with students, Picard's initial response was a blanket denial. But when the detectives specified that they were there about her relationship with this particular student, her story began to shift. The officer writes, quote, then said that she was in shock and believes she knows what we were talking about, referring to the student-teacher relationship. She then allegedly made a series of admissions about their contact. She confirmed they communicated via text messages and even recalled giving him her number. The document records her statement, quote, Ciara recalled exchanging phone numbers with victim one in his freshman or sophomore year of high school. She told him that she loved him while in high school. She explained that looking back, she realizes that it was not professional for her to do that. The detectives then confronted her with the evidence. They showed her two revealing photographs that the victim said she sent him. Her response, as quoted in the warrant, is direct. When shown the first photo, the affidavit states, quote, Ciara confirmed that was a photograph of herself and that she did indeed send that to victim one. Shown a second photo, police say her admission was even more direct. Ciara confirmed this to be her, and when I asked if she sent them to victim one, she replied, well, yeah. Then the detectives read her the explicit text messages recovered from the victim. The warrant describes her reaction, quote, Ciara began to cry and stated that she felt stupid for sending those text messages. However, when asked about the most serious allegations of physical, sexual contact while the victim was a student, her answers became vague. In a crucial passage, the narrator writes, quote, I again asked Ciara if anything happened while victim one was a student. Ciara then changed her answer and stated that she doesn't remember and didn't recall if things happened when victim one was a student. Shortly after this interview, she obtained a lawyer and she stopped cooperating with investigators. But the affidavit reveals one more piece of evidence, a handwritten letter that the victim found dated from when he was a senior in high school. And it's not a casual note. The letter, which police say was even signed by Picard, reads, quote, you mean the world to me, Songbird. I love you immeasurably. With the victim's testimony, the saved text messages, the photos, her partial admissions, and this letter, a judge found probable cause. The warrant for Ciara Picard's arrest was signed, leading to the charges that she now faces. So who is Ciara Picard? Well, the public record and her own professional profiles paint a picture of a dedicated and accomplished educator in the world of music, a stark contrast to the person who we just described according to the arrest warrant. Now, until her resignation, which happened in August of this year, she was a fixture at Maloney High School in Meriden. An alumni post from the Maloney Music Boosters dated December 31st, 2022 celebrated her commitment. The post reads, quote, we are so thankful for various members of the school's alumni and Ciara Picard as they give our students musical opportunities every single day and touch their lives in a more special way. Now, her career was decorated with accolades. A member spotlight from the Civic Orchestra of New Haven dated May 7th, 2019 details her credentials. The spotlight noted, quote, Ciara Picard Cohen began her teaching career in Hartford as a pre-K through 8 music and orchestra director. Currently, Ciara works at Francis T. Maloney High School in Meriden, Connecticut, where she has been an orchestra director and music teacher for the past 6 years. There, she also acts as a choreographer for the theater program and plays violin alongside fellow students in the pit orchestra for performances. She received a Bachelor of Music and Music Education and violin voice performance at the Crane School of Music at SUNY Potsdam in New York. She's been the recipient of many professional experiences, including a fellowship from the Dalio Foundation to study aesthetic immersion and arts education at Lincoln Center. On paper, she was a model teacher, but now that same person, the person with all those accolades that we just listed, is accused of exploiting the trust that she was given as an educator in the most profound way imaginable. Join us now to talk a little bit more about this investigation and what could happen next is Bryce Hensley, trial attorney. Thank you for being with us once again here on Law and Crime. I know that you've worked cases like this representing victims, and there's a civil aspect likely moving forward in this case as well. But what do you make of, as far as the criminal investigation? Because we do see cases like this, but this goes back to 2018. And even before that, this victim alleges that they had a relationship starting in 2014, and there was grooming, and then it escalated to physical interaction. And then he walks into a police station this year, lays all of this out, seems to have the digital evidence, and now this teacher, Ciara Picard, is facing some serious charges.
Yeah. This is an incredibly serious case, and it's one that, a lot of credit to the victim for coming forward, and that's not uncommon. What we see a lot of times in cases like this involving individuals who were sexually abused as children, it usually takes a significant amount of time for them to process what happened. A lot of times there are feelings of guilt, both in terms of how other people are going to perceive them and also how they perceive themselves. And there's usually an effort by the victim to try to move on in a certain aspect. That's why sometimes you see these cases come forward maybe years later after the victim has time to digest everything that's happened and when they feel that they have the strength to come forward.
And in this case, the victim seems to have kept a lot of evidence as far as the text messages. He has pictures. These were presented to Ciara Picard by investigators, and she seemed to give somewhat, according to police, admission that she did send the text messages, that she did take and send these pictures. How does that factor into the case against her? Because, I don't think I have text messages if I went back all the way to 2018 or so, but this person held on to them because she probably could deny, without the evidence being presented, that this ever happened.
Yeah, they're incredibly damning. I think what we're seeing here with this individual, there was probably an immediate response of trying to deny anything physical happened. Maybe there was trying to hedge her bets a little bit by saying, oh, well, this was all just communications, nothing physical actually happened. Again, this is why in situations like this, everybody always says, consult with an attorney, invoke your Fifth Amendment rights. In situations like this, that type of evidence is corroborative of the victim's story about what actually happened. So I foresee the police and eventually prosecutors using this evidence to secure a conviction of this individual.
I know this case took place in Connecticut. You practice in Illinois, but if this were to happen in Illinois, how much time would someone have to come forward? Because, there's statute of limitations on some crimes, but, in this case, to walk forward and to present all this evidence almost a decade later, I feel like you just typically don't see that wide a period of time leading to criminal charges.
Yeah. Well, in Illinois, there's no statute of limitations with respect to child sex crimes. And that's a growing trend that we're seeing actually around the country in most states. Most legislators recognize what I was describing earlier, which is a psychological phenomenon. There are studies out there that show that children or people that are abused as children don't come forward for years or even decades sometimes. And so that recognition is now codified in a lot of criminal and civil statutes that allow victims to come forward. It's why a lot of times you'll hear, for instance, in New York, there was what's called a revival window, where there was a brief period of time that the legislator allowed individuals to come forward and still bring their lawsuits, because it's patently unfair, knowing what we know now about the psychology of child sex abuse victims, for them to be barred from ever bringing a lawsuit or seeking criminal charges against these individuals.
The word that really sticks out too when you look at the relationship that police lay out is grooming, and how this was a student-teacher relationship, but then it seems that it took this turn where they're taking trips together to go see concerts in New York City. She's buying gifts. The family of the victim remembers her giving the victim these gifts. What do you make of just how it seems this relationship went between the teacher and the student?
Well, it follows the traditional pattern that we see in situations like this, especially in school settings. These adults have basically unfettered access to children, right? Parents drop them off at school with the understanding that they're going to be taken care of by these adults, and the adults take advantage of that. There's nobody watching them while they're at school, and so in a situation like this, what we typically see are some initial grooming type behaviors, gratitude, gifts that come forward. Oh, thank you so much for, the way that you presented in class today, or hey, I got you a little something to make you, to make you feel better. And what that does psychologically for a child is it starts breaking down the walls of comfort, right? Over time, what we then see is these abusers, these perpetrators, pushing the limits to the point where all of a sudden now it becomes private communications away from school, and eventually the communication aspect of it turns physical. And that's exactly what happened in this case, and it's what we see all over the country in cases like this.
When it comes to any sort of civil action, and we have a long way to go because Sierra Picard was just arrested, and she'll go through the criminal justice system, and we'll see how that plays out. But who or what could be the target of any civil action on behalf of the victim in this case?
Well, certainly the school district. Whoever was employing this teacher at the time, my understanding, if I'm correct, is that she was a music teacher. And so we have to look at who her employer was. At the end of the day, most school districts these days have what are called mandatory reporting laws. If you see something, you have to say something. There's questions that arise with respect to the hiring practices of the school, of the supervisory practices of the school. It sounds like this teacher was able to have what sounds like private lessons with this student. That raises serious concerns, and that has to raise the question of, well, who saw this and who didn't report this? If it went on for as long as the student is claiming, I have to believe that somebody at the school saw something. And so while the teacher herself is going to be the subject of any civil lawsuit, I think the bigger target is actually going to be the school district or her employer.
How do you, if you're representing this victim, I'm sure the school district is going to want to protect itself. I'm sure it has a lawyer. And if you're trying to figure out, okay, like maybe there was a superior who turned a blind eye. Maybe there's a member of the school that, turned investigators away at one point. Like maybe there was a report that came in years ago. Like how do you on the outside figure out what was going on not saying that any of those things happened at Maloney High School in Connecticut, but how do you figure out on behalf of the victim what exactly was going on?
Well, unfortunately, there's only so much you can do before you actually file a lawsuit. You can obviously talk to the victim. You can ask the victim if they recall any adults ever stopping into the room. Those can then be the subject of targeted inquiries. You can try to investigate and sit down with them and have an interview with them. Chances are they're not going to be willing to talk to you. So what you usually have to do is actually file a lawsuit. And at that point, you can compel testimony through things called depositions, where you actually sit down on the record asking questions of these individuals. You can send subpoenas for documents and things like that. And so a lot of times you're hamstrung up until you file an actual lawsuit, because a lot of the information that you're probably looking for is in the hands of the school district or the school district's employees.
And when it comes to kind of the school district and their responsibility in these cases, and I'm thinking more broad picture because, we talk about, anybody who watches Law and Crime, we're talking about cases like this almost on a weekly basis. And if you Google teacher arrested, you will likely see today there will be more cases similar to this one. It seems like this is just happening a lot. But at the same time, if you're a school district, this teacher, resume-wise, she seemed as accomplished as anything. Like she had some fellowship with Lincoln Center, which is incredibly prestigious in New York City. She's won all these awards. On the surface, she seems like exactly who you would want to have teaching kids who are interested in music. Like, how is a school district supposed to know whether this person, allegedly, or any teacher in these situations would be capable of something like this?
Well, you bring up a good point about the hiring practices. And like you said, a lot of times these teachers pass initial muster, right? I think in a situation like this, the first thing you do need to look to is the hiring. And it sounds like this teacher passed that. But I think school districts need to put an increased emphasis on their hiring practices, things like background checks, to make sure that the people that they're hiring are capable of actually taking care of children. But in a situation like this, if somebody does come through and they have all of the bona fides to get past the initial interview and get the job, I think it comes down to the training that school districts implement with respect to noticing the signs. You brought up grooming. A lot of times, grooming behavior it has an outward look to it, right? Teachers know what those signs are, and typically when you see something like that, the first knee-jerk reaction that adults will have to it is, well, that seems a little bit odd. And I think as soon as teachers see that, as soon as anybody within the school sees something like that, it should be at least a yellow flag, if not a red flag, to notify superiors. So it comes back to training. It comes back to the actual supervising of these individuals. Again, music teacher, ordinary science teacher, math teacher, whoever it is, there should be some level of oversight from principal, vice principal, deans, whatever the school structure is. There has to be supervisors in place tracking these things. And then I think most important is making somebody available, making sure students are aware of the inappropriateness of that type of behavior and giving them an outlet to then report. A lot of times, in this case sounds like a prime example, students, young kids are afraid to come forward. They think there might be repercussions. They may be led to think that what they're doing is wrong and they have to keep it a secret by the perpetrator. The perpetrator will say things like that to them, but they need to understand that this is wrong, and they need to know that they have an outlet that they can go to report this type of behavior as soon as it starts.
When it comes to these cases too, because we do cover so many of them, I know we've talked about cases in the past, and again, anybody who watches Law and Crime, a teacher accused of crossing the line with a student, it just seems like it's happening a lot. And it's one of those things where, like, I had great teachers, never had a problem with the teacher, and I think overall, you got to be a great person to get into that profession. But then these seem to happen a lot. Just from your perspective, and I know you work in representing a lot of victims in cases like this, are we seeing more of these? Like, is there a problem, or is this just kind of, we just happen to put the spotlight on the bad apple that seems to just be crossing the line, and it just is happening a lot?
Well, let me say this. I come from a family of educators. I have my mom, 3 or 4 aunts. My sister was formerly a teacher. My brother's a teacher. So I'm very familiar with the educational world, and I think there are so many great teachers out there. But I think what we are seeing is an epidemic. Now, is it a problem of just an increasing number of these teachers doing this? Or is it, like you said, us finally shining a spotlight onto a broader problem and we're starting to pick up the signs? And I think it might be a combination of both. But what I will say is that because of stories like this, because of the work that you do and a lot of these networks are now doing, shining the light on this stuff, I think it's raising the awareness for parents. I think it's raising the awareness for students. And I think it's making people feel more comfortable coming forward. I alluded to earlier a lot of these state legislators changing laws. And I think there has been more of a national conversation now about sexual abuse and sexual assault. And I think people are more willing to come forward now because they recognize that this does happen, that they're not alone. And I think that all we can do here on the legal side is obviously continue to represent individuals in cases like this. But I would encourage parents to continue keeping an eye out for the signs. And then for any students out there or for any survivors of a situation like this, come forward and make your voice heard so that situations like this can be prevented in the future.
Yeah, well put. You just hope that people continue to come forward, that more parameters can be put in place to prevent this stuff. And, in this case, you think of this victim, probably bottling up a lot for a long time, but then gets the courage to walk into a police station, and we'll see where the investigation goes from here. Bryce Hensley, it's always great to have you on Law and Crime, trial attorney. Thank you as always for being with us.
Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Ciara Picard posted bond. She is due back in court on December 16th. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.